Good morning. My name's Faith. I'm from the North Valley Property Owners Association. I get to work here and I absolutely love it. Before we get started today, I do want to remind you guys that I am not an attorney. Rather, we are going to be discussing today a couple of forms that are commonly used in the housing industry. Those two forms are a notice of termination of tenancy or a notice of termination of tenancy for no fault, just cause. We're going to discuss what form to use when and how to use it. As we get started, again, I'm not an attorney, but I have been in the housing industry and I'm excited to help you today. If you have any additional questions beyond what we speak about today, please know that you can contact me or my supervisor, Jennifer, at the North Valley Property Owners Association. You can call us at 530-345-1321. Now, as we get started today, we're going to go ahead and start out by going to our NVPOA website. As you go to our website, you will notice that we have a portion of our website called Resources. And as you go to Resources, you can go down to AB1482. And this is an important assembly bill for us to kind of keep in mind today. This assembly bill is important because it affects what termination of tenancy we give and how we give it. So the first thing that we're going to want to focus on today is whether or not your property is exempt from AB 1482 or if it is regulated by AB 1482. Now, if you are wondering if your property is exempt, you can scroll down here to qualifying factors for an exempt property. So they have multiple different reasons why a property would be exempt. But we're going to focus on just a couple that are pretty common. So one of those is if you have an occupied unit. Another is if you have an owner-occupied duplex. So if you are an owner and you live on one side of that duplex, you would be considered an exempt property. The next would be if you have a single-family home. Now, in contrast to that, if you are a regulated property by AB 1482, that means that you own a multifamily home. A multifamily home can be anything from multiple units on one lot to a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, an apartment complex, anything that is more than just one unit. So with that being said, if you have an exempt property from AB 1482, then today we are going to be talking about how you simply give a termination of tenancy. Now, if you are somebody that would consider using some of the resources that we have, we actually, if you join our membership, we actually have a forms library that gives you access to a lot of different rental forms. You know, once you become a member of our association, we give you a login to our member-only portal. And on that portal, you can go here to our forms library. In our forms library, you will find that we have a ton of forms. So we have everything from qualifying forms, such as an application to rent, to move-in forms, such as a rental package A, which is a rental agreement that includes a ton of addendums. All of our forms are reviewed by attorneys and are approved. So they are up to date with everything legislatively, and we have a lot of information that you need to know. Next, we have like move-out forms. We also have move-in forms up here. And we have notices. Now today we're going to focus on our move-out form section. We have the termination of tenancy, which in parentheses you'll see it says exempt from AB 1482. So again, those are those single-family homes. And then we have our notice of termination of tenancy for no fault, just cause. And again, those are for our regulated homes. For the notice of termination of tenancy for no fault, just cause, some things to keep in mind when you're filling it out is that if your resident has lived there less than a year, then you are only required to give them 30 days notice of a termination of tenancy. Now, if they've been there longer than a year, though, you are required to give them 60 days notice of termination of tenancy. You'll notice on this form that there's an opportunity for you to pick the amount of days that you're giving them before the termination of this tenancy, whether that's 30 days or 60 days. But on both of those timelines, you'll see it says 30 days after service of this notice upon you or blank, whichever is later. It also does that for 60 days and for 90 days. Now, the blank is intended for you to have an opportunity to put an additional time period. So let's say you wanted to give them 36 days instead of 30, which you're only required to give 30, but you want to give them 36 because you want it to end on the first of the month or the last day of the month or something like that. Where it says, or you would put in the exact date, let's say July 30th or June 1st or whatever it is, you're going to put the exact date that you want the termination of tenancy to end. So that's just some stuff to keep in mind. Because you're an exempt property, you are not required to give relocation assistance, and you don't have to give a reason why. Now, moving forward, if you are a multifamily home, which is a regulated property, and it's regulated under AB 1482, you give the notice of termination of tenancy for no fault, just cause. Now, when you have a regulated home by this Assembly Bill, which is really, this Assembly Bill 1482 was put in place to protect tenants. You still follow the same rule of if the residents live there less than a year, you give them 30 days notice. If they live there longer than a year, you give them 60 days notice. Now, if the resident has lived there for less than a year, and they live in a regulated property by AB 1482, then you have the option, and I would recommend that you just give them a notice of non-renewal. Whereas if they've lived there longer than a year, then they now qualify to receive the termination of tenancy for no fault, just cause. In addition to this, if they are in a fixed term lease, then they cannot receive a termination of tenancy. They have to be in a month-to-month lease in order to receive a termination of tenancy. So a lot of times we'll see that people get in a 1-year lease and it's got in the rental agreement, such as our rental agreements have this, that after the 1 year, it'll go on and it'll roll on to a month-to-month lease. It'll be an automatic renewal to a month-to-month lease. It'll kind of just roll on. When it comes to the owner agent, like why they are terminating the tenancy though, you have to have one of the 4 reasons that they indicate here. So one reason that you would be allowed to terminate the tenancy would be if you plan on occupying the unit. Another reason would be like if a family member was planning to occupy the unit. But this is very specific as to what family members are allowed. The family members that are allowed are a domestic partner, a child, a grandchild, a parent, or grandparent. So an auntie and uncle would not qualify as somebody moving in that you would be able to terminate a tenancy for. Next would be if you want to withdraw the property from the rental market. Maybe you are withdrawing it from the rental market because you'd like to put it on the seller's market. That's a very common reason why people withdraw it from the rental market. Third would be if you intend to demolish or substantially remodel the property. So when we say substantial remodel, I think a good indicator is if you have to get a permit for the remodeling that you're doing, or if there's a habitability issue that you need to remodel the unit so it is habitable. Those would be good reasons why you might want to terminate a tenancy in order to do the remodeling. And the last reason is if the owner is complying with the local ordinance, court order, or other government entity resulting in the need to vacate the property. Those are the only reasons. Now again, AB 1482, with regulated properties, it requires you to give relocation assistance. This can look like you can waive the last month's rent, or when they go to leave, you can give them 1 month's rent. So an example of this would be if it's $1,000 to rent from you each month, and you want to terminate this tenancy, you give the notice, but the last month you waive. So they don't have to pay the last month's rent. Instead, they can save that money and try and find a place to relocate. Another example would be they live there the whole time, give termination of tenancy, and then when they go to leave, you give them what would be 1 month's rent. So if 1 month's rent is $1,000, when they go to leave, you give them $1,000. You have 15 days from the point of serving them this notice to give them that relocation assistance to help them find their new location and to be able to put money down on that new location. I want to also encourage you to give a notice regarding pre-inspection when you do go to give a notice of termination of tenancy, whether it's for no fault, just cause, or just a regular termination of tenancy. The reason being is that a notice regarding pre-inspection really just reminds the resident that they have a right to a pre-inspection, and you have to give that at least 2 weeks prior to the move-out date. So I encourage people to just give it to them whenever they're giving them a notice of termination of tenancy, so you don't have to remember to give them that form later on. I hope that this helps you today. This is all you need to know to be able to terminate a tenancy for no fault, just cause. And this is, again, it's very different than an eviction. This person hasn't done anything wrong. You simply want to terminate the tenancy. If it's a regulated property, it's for one of the 4 reasons given. And if it's an exempt property, you don't have to give a reason. But for whatever reason you are choosing to do it, this is how you terminate that tenancy without it having to be an eviction, but rather you're just terminating it on good terms. With that being said, if you guys have any questions, give us a call. 530-345-1321 is the number to our office. We'd be happy to help you in any way we can. Again, remember, we are not attorneys, but our association is very helpful in providing you resources, in educating you, and advocating for you as homeowners.